Hey, it's Craig. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Canadian History X early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Hey everyone, Craig Baird here. Before I begin today's story, I want to take a moment and ask that you check me out on Patreon at www.patreon.com/CanadaEHX. There are several tiers with great benefits, from ad-free content to t-shirts and other cool stuff. And don't forget, you can also donate directly to the show at www.canadaehx.com. Just click donate. It helps keep this show going. Okay, on with the show.
I live in a small town just to the west of Edmonton, and when I drive into Alberta's capital, I often take a road that circles the city. And it's named for a man who died over a century ago, before the city even existed. And it's quite possible he never even saw this region. So why does it carry his name then? Well, it's all because of an epic journey he took west 250 years ago when he went further than any European before him. I'm Craig Baird, this is Canadian History X, and today we are sharing the story of the man who inspired future explorers with tales of his glimpses of the Rocky Mountains, Anthony Henday. In January 2024, I shared the story of the first recorded European to visit what became Alberta and Saskatchewan. In 1691, Henry Kelsey set out to find new trading partners for the Hudson's Bay Company. His journey became legendary, but the company wasn't eager to send out more people. They were more than happy to have the First Nations come to them. Now, Henry Kelsey's story ended on November 1st, 1724, when he died in England at only 56 years of age after leading a full and adventurous life. A year later, a baby was born on the Isle of Wight who would one day continue Kelsey's legacy. He was baptized on Christmas Day 1725 in Shorewell, and he was given the name Anthony Henday. Anthony Henday's early life is shrouded in mystery. Now, we can do our best to wave away the mists of time and guess that he was likely born poor. As a teenager, he more than likely survived on his own and developed a thrill of adventure. Both skills would come in handy in the future, but at the time, they got him into trouble. You see, Anthony Henday was a smuggler and had been for a while, but his career of crime ended in 1748 when he was caught and convicted. At the time, that meant banishment rather than imprisonment. Now, for the next 2 years, he couldn't go home, so maybe he spent his time wandering the streets of London. We don't know for sure, but we do know that in 1750, Henday joined the Hudson's Bay Company. Now, he started out as a net maker and laborer, which was pretty much the lowest position one could have in the company, which did not know he was a convicted criminal. Or perhaps they did and they simply didn't care. What mattered most to the company at the time was the fur trade in North America, and things were just heating up. You'll remember in 1670, King Charles II gave the Hudson's Bay Company a monopoly over what was known as Rupert's Land, a 3.8 million square kilometer area, 1/3 of modern-day Canada, stretching from Labrador and Baffin Island to the Rocky Mountains. And for decades, no one challenged the company's control over this mini-kingdom. Now, by the mid-1700s, French voyageurs were venturing deeper into North America to trade with the First Nations and divert goods from ever reaching the company's forts. Now, if the French took over the trade, the Hudson's Bay Company could not survive. The company was facing threats from multiple fronts because at the time, Arthur Dobbs, who was a British Army officer and colonial administrator, was actively trying to end their monopoly. He felt the company had zero interest in exploring the region they controlled, nor in finding the Northwest Passage, so they should not have a monopoly over the territory. Now, a British parliamentary inquiry in 1749 ruled that the Hudson's Bay Company could keep its charter, but the message was clear: explore or lose your rights over the land. Now, aside from Henry Kelsey decades earlier, no one else had really gone into Western Canada. James Isham, the chief factor of York Factory, knew that to keep the charter they had to send someone deeper into the continent to lay claim for the company. As a bonus, this intrepid individual would convince the First Nations to trade with the British and not the French. And the higher-ups at the Hudson's Bay Company agreed. So, they sought to volunteer. Enter the man of the hour, Anthony Henday. Now, he was already likely bored as a laborer and was keen to go on an adventure. And Henday was accepted as the leader of the expedition. And he was tasked with going into the interior of present-day Western Canada to convince the First Nations to travel to the Hudson Bay to trade their furs. On June 26, 1754, Anthony Henday, Atikasish, a Cree interpreter along with several other Cree, set out from York Factory on their mission. Now, like with Henry Kelsey before him, this journey was not about surveying or mapping. This was about meeting the First Nations, nothing more. Since Henday did not map his route, we don't know exactly which way he took, but we know he traveled southwest through present-day Manitoba and Saskatchewan and into Alberta along the major rivers. Now, on July 15, 1754, he passed Pascoya, the French fort near the Pas, Manitoba. Henry Kelsey had previously camped in the area during the winter of 1690, and he had named it Deering's Point in honor of Sir Edward Deering, the deputy governor of the Hudson's Bay Company. He wrote in his diary of the place, "At Deering's Point, after the frost, I set up a certain cross, in token of my being there, cut out on it ye date of year, and likewise for it verify the same, added to it my master's name." Now, the area had been renamed Fort Pascoya and was now under French control. It was established at around 1740 and was named after the Cree word for narrows. It was one of 4 forts running up a chain of lakes from Lake Winnipeg, which formed a defensive wall in trade as they detoured the furs away from Hudson Bay and down towards the Great Lakes region. Now, Henday wrote, "I don't very well like it, having nothing to satisfy them on what account I am going up the country, and very possibly they may expect me to be a spy." And the French traders did. They threatened to seize him and send him to France. And it was only the size of the Cree company Henday traveled with that deterred them from ever doing so. Now, around the Carrot River region in northern Saskatchewan, Henday set out on foot and the number of Cree traveling with him continued to grow. Every day, a new family heading west joined their caravan. And by now, Henday had a Cree woman as his companion. She has no name in his journal. He simply referred to her as his bedfellow. I should note that the Hudson's Bay Company edited her out of his journals when it was published, as relationships with Indigenous women were frowned upon. Anthony Henday continued his journey and crossed the South Saskatchewan River near Saskatoon around August 21, 1754. Now, the large party used rafts made by stretching moose skins across willow frames. And a few weeks later, on September 6th, they met a group of Assiniboine who had never traded with white men before, and he was able to convince them to travel to York Factory to trade furs with the company. A few days later, around September 11th, he passed from present-day Saskatchewan into Alberta, and 1 month later, he reached what he referred to as the Weskasoo River. Now, Weskasoo is the anglicized version of the Cree word for elk, and it's believed this means he had reached the Red Deer River, which flows for about 724 kilometers from the Rocky Mountains through central Alberta until it meets the South Saskatchewan River near Leader, Saskatchewan. This was the Blackfoot's territory, and at the time they were at war with the Cree, and Henday was unaware of this or simply didn't care about the conflict. He only cared to resolve matters and facilitate trade. So he met with both Cree and Blackfoot leaders and was actually surprised to see that the Blackfoot were riding horses. Now, horses were first introduced by the French into Canada in the mid-1600s, but no one realized they had traveled so far west. In the early 1700s, there were no horses, so at some point, in the 1730s or the 1740s, horses arrived from the east and fundamentally changed things. And this shows how much the world had already changed for the First Nations in what would become Canada. And months later, when Henday shared stories of the horses with his superiors, they refused to believe him. On October 14th, Henday counted 322 teepees on the top of a hill near modern-day Pine Lake in Innisfail, Alberta. It was a massive Blackfoot encampment, and one teepee was large enough to hold 50 people and was the chief's home. Now, Henday was invited inside by the chief and met with 20 Blackfoot elders. And while Henday spoke, his translator translated what he said into Blackfoot. Henday invited them to York Factory to trade with the company, and while the chief actually did appreciate the offer, he refused to leave his territory, because traveling to York Factory meant going through Cree land, and there was a real risk of an attack. Plus, the Blackfoot already had a trading partner they liked, the French. Henday wrote, "We have no hopes of getting them to the fort, as what cloth they had were French, and by their behavior, I perceived they were strongly attached to the French interest." Now, despite their refusal, the Blackfoot treated Henday as an honored guest. He was offered boiled bison meat and 12 bison tongues, a delicacy reserved only for the honored guests. And Henday spent the next several months in the immediate area, stocking up on furs and provisions. And on Christmas Eve, 1754, he wrote in his journal, "Had a fine view of Arseniwachi at a far distance, it being the last sight that I ever shall have of it this year." Now that was the name for the Rocky Mountains. Henday was the first known European to ever see them. And it's not known if he saw the mountains from Calgary or somewhere else in the region, but Henday also believed that the Pacific Ocean was just on the other side of the mountains. Like many future explorers, he stated the water running from the mountains was salty and tasted like brine. He truly believed that its source was just through the mountains. Now, it wasn't, of course, but the part of him that wanted to find a route to the ocean to get a massive bonus and etch his name in history absolutely wanted it to be. In truth, he was nearly 1,000 kilometers away from the Pacific Ocean. Now, when not dreaming of the Pacific Ocean, Henday hunted bison. Today, if I want to see one, I drive about an hour to Elk Island National Park, where about 700 bison live. But back in the 1700s, they were everywhere. Massive herds numbering in the tens of thousands would cause the land to shake under their feet as they ran across the landscape. So for Henday, seeing a great herd would have been awe-inspiring. And several times they had to alter direction for kilometers just to get around a large herd. He wrote in his journal, "I went with the young men a buffalo hunting, all armed with bows and arrows. Killed 7, fine sport. So expert are the natives that they will take their arrows from them when they are foaming and raging in pain, tearing up the ground with their feet and horns until they fall down." Once spring arrived, he returned to York Factory. Now, it's unknown which route he took, but some believe he retraced his steps, while others theorize he went north to the mouth of the Sturgeon River. Now, this is just east of present-day Edmonton, and it's possible he reached the Fort Saskatchewan area in early March 1755. And this is the reason an Edmonton road carries his name. About a month later, on April 27th, he continued east, reaching Fort Piscoya on May 26th and York Factory on June 23rd. His journey took him 2,900 kilometers through Western Canada by canoe and on foot. And in his report, he suggested that a group of men should go inland to trade directly with the First Nations on a rotating basis. And James Isham, the company man in York Factory, agreed. But when he took it to the leadership, they were hesitant. But for his work, Henday was given a 20-pound bonus. A week after Henday returned to York Factory, he was told to go back out with William Grover, a company official, to visit some of the forts deeper into the interior. But Grover couldn't handle the journey, and within a month, the men were back at York Factory. And by now, despite the relatively young age of Henday, he was also beginning to slow down. That long journey to meet the Blackfoot had absolutely taken its toll. In 1756, Isham sent him into the interior to establish a settlement about 800 kilometers west of York Factory. But Henday couldn't actually complete the mission. Ill health forced him to return. And 2 years later, he wintered near York Factory at Sheep River, and he was so ill that a party had to be sent out to retrieve him. And it's believed that Henday traveled west again in 1759 with Blackfoot or Cree to build a trading network, but there's little evidence of this journey in the records. All that is known is that in June 1760 he appeared at York Factory with 61 First Nations canoes. And after this, it would officially take the company another 25 years to send another man into the interior, and his name was Samuel Hearne. For his part, Anthony Henday left the Hudson's Bay Company in 1762 because he did not believe his efforts were being properly recognized. Little else is known about his last journey, but it was clear he was unhappy. But he did make good money. He saved 113 pounds of the 120 pounds he was paid for his time with the company. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to live on for a while, and from this point on, he disappears from history. We don't know what he did after he left the company or even when he died, but perhaps he returned to smuggling, or maybe he spent his time back home in England, sitting at a table with a mug of ale, dreaming of the awe-inspiring mountains and when he saw things that no other living European had ever seen. I hope you enjoyed that episode and our look at Anthony Henday. This show is researched, produced, and written by me, Craig Baird, with the help of Dila Velasquez. Audio production and design by Rosalind Kufor. If this is your first time listening and you like what you heard, please take a moment and give us a 5-star review to help other people find these amazing stories. And there are so many for you to sink your teeth into. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please check out my other podcasts, From John to Justin, Canada, A Yearly Journey, Pucks and Cups, and Canada's Great War. We love hearing from you, so if you have a show topic you want me to cover, email me at craig@canadaehx.com. Or stop by my website and social media. I'll include all of those in my show notes. Until next time, I'm Craig Baird, and this is Canadian History X.